This is Talking Drupal, a bi-weekly chat about web design development by a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. Recorded live on Wednesday afternoons in a Google Hangout. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. Today is episode 95, Wednesday, May 20th. Happy birthday, Mom. Easy does it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. As you can tell, I'm not the normal host. Unfortunately, Steve Cross couldn't be with us today, but don't worry, he'll be back for the next show, I'm sure. I'm filling some pretty big shoes today. My name is John Picozzi. Umthink.com is where you can find me. With me today, as usual, is Nick Laughlin. Nick, how are you doing?
Good afternoon. And as you said, Steve's not able to join us today, but we do have a couple of guests who are not necessarily new to the podcasting game, so I'm sure we'll be fine. And I'll let you introduce them.
Yeah, we definitely have some podcasting pros with us today. Joining us, first off, is Mike Anello, Ultimike on Drupal.org, co-owner of Drupal Easy, creator of the Drupal Career Online 12-week Drupal Career Training Program. That's a mouthful. And also the co-maintainer of the Drupal 8 Migrate system. We're definitely have to talk about that. Mike helps to organize the Florida Drupal Users Group and is a member of the Drupal Association, doing community cultivation grants and committees. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. First of all, I'd go easy on the podcast pros adjective. For anybody who's heard our podcast knows that we try to be pros, but we often stumble. So.
Hey, listen, we are all about shameless self-promotion here, so feel free to take the credit.
I think the most accurate thing you said is we have a podcast. So.
That's all it takes. It's a small step. And joining us as well is Ryan Price, Liberator on Drupal.org, works for FFW. You can ask him what that stands for. He has an app for that. Co-organizer as well of the Florida Drupal User Group, and has some other podcasts, blogging Fringe and bringing art and technology together. That's actually really interesting. How's it going, Ryan?
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, John. Yeah, I was thinking at the beginning of the show, you guys should change this one time for guys who have one thing in common. We love baseball.
That is true, except Nick is not a big sports fan.
Okay.
No.
I am also wearing my I Love Drupal shirt. I don't know if you guys could see that, but
that's good.
Yeah, they're selling those down at DrupalCon, so I was like, I have to buy one of these and wear it everywhere.
Did you get the one that says I Drupal LA?
No.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Oh man. So, getting right into our topic, obviously Mike, Ryan, and I are all freshly back from DrupalCon. And we want to spend some of today's show talking about that and kind of giving our top 3 takeaways. So, top 3 takeaways from DrupalCon. We're going to reserve this to no parties. I may ask about the parties later on, but we'll see. Mike, what are your top 3 takeaways from DrupalCon LA?
Yeah, that's a tough one. First of all, I'd argue with your use of the word fresh back from DrupalCon, because I feel anything but fresh. I think I still need about 3 or 4 more days before I feel like I'm myself again.
And 4 or 5 more showers, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I wouldn't go that far, but let me just say, sleeping is coming extremely easy being back in my own bed. So, some takeaways. Yeah, takeaways. For me, it's always just seeing the people that I haven't seen in a year since the last DrupalCon and touching base and seeing how everyone's doing and just, having those face-to-face conversations with people that I normally just see either in an IRC or in issue queues and things like that. It's always really good to see people face-to-face and kind of make that human connection. I actually had, I think from a technology standpoint, I only saw, other than the session I presented, I think I was present for about 2 half sessions where I showed up late. so that counts as a half session. But I did have some really interesting conversations with some people. One of them was I sat down with Jesus from Ryan's company, FFW, and learned a bunch about Drupal console, which really just, blew my socks off. I actually immediately installed it and started playing with it. So if you haven't, seen a presentation on Drupal console or read about it, I'm sure you can go to the DrupalCon site and check out Jesus' session on Drupal console.
Yeah, I was actually in that session. It was definitely very cool. And for those of you that may not know what Drupal console is, it's basically a command line tool for help with Drupal 8 development. And some of you may also be thinking, as I was, what is, well, there's Drush. What is this Drupal console thing? Drush and Drupal console completely different, but they are working on integration and making sure that they don't step on each other's toes. So
what's the biggest difference then?
I think Drupal console, its original, number one, it's built on Symfony. So it's got a lot of Symfony goodness, a lot of PHP introspection built in, which is really interesting. It was originally designed, and I hope I'm saying this right. It was really originally designed to help developers kind of scaffold Drupal 8 modules.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the functions they actually went over in the talk was to basically give you the structure to start building a Drupal module. Because of all of the YAML files and plugins and services and stuff, there's a lot of ramping up to be able to start creating a module, and this actually gives you basically command line ability to start that process and get those files generated automatically or without you having to do it yourself. So it's definitely very cool.
I would add that it's not completely separate. Like the functionality is not completely separate from Drush right now. There is, if you look at a Venn diagram of the two of them, there's a little bit of overlap there. And one example I can give you on that is, on Friday, which is the day of the code sprint, I was talking to this other gentleman, Enzo is his username, about, actually it's not his username, it's his name, about Drupal console and about the migrate in D8 stuff. And he kind of dropped a bomb on me when he said, yeah, Drush console supports Drupal 8 migration. I was like, what are you talking about? Because up to now, when we test migrations in D8, we're using Drush. He goes, no, we put a migrate command into Drupal console. So you can run migrations almost interactively. Well, not almost, sort of interactively through Drupal console. So it's a really cool, kind of very quickly developing platform.
Yeah, it is very cool, and they are working with the Drush team to kind of bring those overlapping functions together and figure out who should kind of manage those. So definitely worth watching the video and learning more about that.
And just as a tease, I'm going to pimp our podcast. We're going to have Jesus on our podcast in about 2 or 3 weeks. So something to watch out for.
As I said, we are all about shameless self-promotion. I recommend watching that because I watched the presentation about Drupal console, and it was very cool. Anything else from you, Mike?
It's a couple smaller things. I finally sat down with some of the platform.sh guys, or team, I should say, and got a really nice in-depth demo on that, which looked very cool. It's a similar product to Acquia Cloud or Pantheon's development environment. Some new wrinkles here and there kind of got me itching to try it out a little bit on a test site. So I think I'll probably do that in the very near future. And the other thing, I think Ryan, you could probably add to this as well, is Amitai Bernstein of Organic Groups and other fame.
Yeah.
He showed me some demos that blew my socks off. One of them specifically, and I'm sure I'm going to get the name wrong again, but it's some type of visual.
Yeah, it's called Shuv.
Shuv, but it allows you to do visual comparison, visual testing. Is that what it was called? I forget what it was, but
well, it's the same thing as you would do with regression testing, but it uses screenshots. It's like
right.
Visual regression testing.
There's
Visual
there's
regression
there's a gentleman in the Boston Drupal meetup named Nick as well, not me, Nick Al. He's doing something similar with Selenium. So he does, it will do, it'll take screenshots of certain pages, and then it will run updates, and then take screenshots again, and then compare the two, and it will flag any pixels that are different. It will flag, we'll do a certain threshold too, so you can say if it's more than 10% different. And then it will also create GIFs out of the different screenshots so you can see the comparison between the two. And it also works, he's working on it, I don't know if he has yet, but he was integrating it with Browser Stack so that you could test multiple browsers as well. I think he calls it Julenium. I don't remember. It's Drupal. I'll look up the name. It was something that he demonstrated a few months ago at a Boston meetup. It was pretty impressive.
This one is called shoov.io, and it's like a full web service that just does this kind of stuff. It helps you manage your changes. It will do some of that same stuff you were just saying, Nick, about how it can compare two screenshots. And the one thing he said, I didn't get to see the demo of this, but that basically you somehow put your Git request in, it will do the regression testing, and then if you like it, then you can just accept the changes right from the web interface. So it's a full software development tool. If you're in this mode, if you're in this sort of testing mode where you're testing out the UI.
It
was also
cool.
just for normal regression testing. He compared it to Pingdom, where Pingdom, all it does is basically send out pings and make sure your site is still up. But visual regression testing can tell you if somebody's changed something, or you've been hacked, or something's happened on your site that's actually changing it visually.
Yep.
Well, and while we're talking about this, there's a full trifecta. Christophe Van Toma from Belgium, his tool walkhub.net will also do a very similar kind of thing.
Yeah, Walkhub. That's with the Pronovix guys, right?
Christophe?
Yeah. It's very cool.
Really interesting. So Ryan, what are your top 3 takeaways from DrupalCon other than the regression testing?
Yeah. I actually got to teach Symfony and Drupal 8 coding training, so it was really interesting to get to see what people are looking at from I want to learn Drupal 8. This is why I want to learn Drupal 8. This is what I'm interested in doing for the next 5 years of my life. So that was really neat, and I didn't go to too many sessions. I went to some BOFs. So there is a BOF about headless Drupal, but people doing headless Drupal don't like calling it headless anymore, so they like calling it decoupled Drupal. And it was a double-length, 2-hour-long BOF, and David, who goes by Eatings on the social media, he's kind of like the reluctant, general of that army. He would not actually probably like me to say the word general, but it's sort of like the person who's standing in front of the mob and going what do we want? Decoupled. When do we want it? Now. And then he's like, okay, now you guys go do it. He gets everybody all riled up. But I think Mike would know a thing or two about that as as the cat herder of the Migrate project right now.
I thought you were just talking about getting people riled up.
Well, yeah. One thing that I ended up missing because my sleep schedule was so messed up was the pre-note, the pre-keynote. But I had told a lot of people from the previous year, I was like, you guys should not miss this. You want to go check it out. And sadly, the video of it, when you go watch it on YouTube, they're mostly showing the slides because they're kind of the video is only recording what the projector was showing. So it doesn't give you the full experience with all the costumes and all the dance motions and the whole group sort of dance that they had everyone do. You couldn't actually see that.
I'm so disappointed in Ryan for missing that, because you of all people would have appreciated that.
I did watch the video, and we did include like 90% of the songs in our DrupalCon podcast recap.
Every year I walk into the pre-note kind of almost like afraid of like being embarrassed for our community about oh no, what's going to happen next. And I remember last year exactly. I remember last year going into it feeling that, like that pit, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, and came out of that one like, oh, that was actually pretty darn funny. That was okay. So this year I'm going into it thinking, all right, well, last year was pretty good, so maybe I've got a little glimmer of hope for this year, but it could always just be really nerdy and,
Mm-hmm.
When they started, like, singing Disney songs with, Drupal words to it, it was genius and hysterically funny. Granted, probably the 3,100, 3,200 people in the room were the only ones who thought it was hysterically funny. But at least everybody in the room kind of, I felt, was at least enjoying themselves.
It's been a big year for Drupal. We have a Drupal rap, and now we have a Drupal Disney musical. So the sky's really the limit for us, right?
Yeah, I think we're going to be using some of those songs in the opening of our podcast moving forward. There's just too much good stuff not to be heard.
The plus side is it didn't end in or it hasn't yet ended in a cease and desist order from Disney. So
that's true.
We're all good.
Yeah, Disney's very quick on that kind of stuff.
I expected a Disney lawyer to actually walk into that room as it was happening, but
there could have been police in that room just to take away Robert Douglas for how creepy he looked in that costume. He just looked guilty of something.
No comment. We love you.
The question I have though, now that they've done this, is like, how could they possibly top it? And I'm like, I think next year they just need to get Campbell Vertesi like in a wire rig, like doing Spider-Man backflips.
I imagine pyrotechnics would be a good addition, but
yeah, I asked Jeff McGuire that exact question. I said, "What next?" Actually, what I first said was, "It's got to be songs all the way. Now on, it just has to be music. It has to be a musical." It was great. He's like, "Yeah, or we just have to go and do something completely different, as far away from a musical as we can get." I'm like, "All right, well." Good luck, because
I smell a reality TV show. So, for me, there were a lot of different things to take away from DrupalCon. I think some of the biggest ones for me don't necessarily have to do specifically with Drupal. I thought Whitney Hess's keynote was great. Didn't have a whole lot to do with Drupal. Actually, didn't have really anything to do with Drupal, but it had to do with something that I think is really important, and talking about how to deal with your kind of work-life balance and your emotional state when you're a developer. And I think a lot of times we're all like nose to the grindstone, working as hard as we can to get these projects out and to do these things. And a lot of times our own personal well-being kind of suffers. So, and it can also it can also hurt your work relationship. So I definitely recommend checking out her keynote. I will say all the keynotes were great. Dries kind of did a history of Drupal and where it's been and where it's going, which was awesome. And then Mike or Matt from Adobe.
Matt Assay.
There you go. Was great. Everybody was like, "Why is this guy from Adobe at an open source conference? What is going on here?" But he had some really great points, and basically it boiled down to, if you want to give back to the community, you're going to find a way or time to do it. And if you want your developers to do that, just get out of their way. So I thought the keynotes were really good, and went to quite a few sessions. Actually, I tried to fill my schedule with sessions as opposed to anything else. And there were some really good ones. A lot of great Drupal 8 sessions to kind of get people into the new things they need to know with Drupal 8. So those are definitely worthwhile. And then what would be the third thing? I don't know. I just think, as Mike said, getting to see people you haven't seen since last year, and talking and networking are great. I mean, I think that's always a good time.
So I think the burning question for our listeners that came out of this DrupalCon is John's prediction that Drupal 8 would be released at DrupalCon LA.
Yeah, you can feel free to send your hate mail to @JohnPicozzi on Twitter, or just mail it to the show's email address. They'll forward it on to me. Yeah, it is true that we are not any. Well, we are closer to getting a full release of Drupal 8, but it still needs work. The word on the street, from what I heard, was they're thinking maybe by the time DrupalCon Bogota rolls around, it'll be ready. So we'll cross our fingers and we'll hope for that.
DrupalCon Barcelona.
I'm sorry, Barcelona. Did I say Bogota?
When did you make this prediction? You didn't make it like 2 weeks ago, did you?
No. It was probably 3 or 4 months ago.
Mm.
It was a pretty terrible prediction on my part.
Well, I'd call it a bold prediction.
Yeah, I was hopeful. I was really hopeful.
So keep in mind, this is our third or fourth prediction. So I think a year and a half ago we predicted by February or so. But then when we were coming up on December, I think we re-predicted. I think I don't remember where Stephen's prediction is. Mine's around DrupalCon Barcelona. John was a bit more optimistic and thought that a release candidate would come out at DrupalCon LA. And for a while there, I think we thought that. But I mean, it certainly is a hot topic, and it certainly is something that people have in mind. I mean, they're still working on Drupal 8. What was the vibe at DrupalCon around Drupal 8? What were people saying about it? As somebody who's kind of spearheading one of the more major pieces of Drupal 8, how do you think Mike, it's going to be going forward?
I think at this point people are just, I don't know, frustrated is the right word, but just enough already. Let's get it out type of mentality. I think there's a general feeling in the community that we're now possibly doing the community harm, which is a strong word, but by not having it out already. Like we could have, Drupal 7 is getting long in the tooth. There's no doubt about it. And the sooner we can get D8 out, the sooner we can kind of turn that perception around. So I think that's what a lot of people are feeling. And that's kind of the sense I got at the con, is like, it's enough. All right, we've had plenty of time. Let's do what we need to do and get it out the door. Let's get the 8.0 version out the door. Do you guys feel the same way, Ryan and John?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, one day of the conference, and actually part of the reason why I didn't get to go to the pre-note is because I had like a 5-hour-long conversation with Nate and Jen of the Backdrop project, and just sort of like, you can hear some stuff on a podcast or, like read it in a blog post or a magazine article, which in the Drupal Watchdog magazine there was a really good Backdrop article. But when you get to sit there and then like other people walk up, and this is the first time that they've seen Nate and Jen since Backdrop was officially released, so it feels real now, even though it's existed for a long time. There's people going like, well, what about PressFlow, and oh, what about this thing, and oh, well, my client this, or this project I worked on, whatever it happens to be. There's like, to see how they reacted to all those different things and watch them go like, no, we have a complete product. This is a story. And, we've been out since the beginning of the year. And then you go to Dries' keynote the very next day, and he's going like, have you seen all the cool stuff that we did in the last 15 years? It was like, there was a little bit, and maybe just because my perception was colored by having spent so long talking about Backdrop the night before, it almost felt like a reaction to that for me. That it was sort of like as Mike says, that the community kind of has this like pent up, like everyone's got their muscles all tensed, like waiting for Drupal 8 to come out, and we can't hold this flex position anymore.
So,
We're ready to do something.
The question is then, and the question that, because we've had Jen and Nate on a couple of times, and as I'm sure you have as well, the question becomes, at what point do you start using Backdrop? When do you start, approaching that with clients, or are you just going to wait for Drupal 8? I mean, I think we all feel that. Drupal 8, I think many of us thought Drupal 8 was going to come out last year, mid last year. And then when you find out it's going to be delayed, you're like, oh, it's going to be delayed maybe 6 months. There's 50 critical issues, maybe 10 months or something. And now we're going on 14, 15 months, and we've got 22 critical issues, and they certainly haven't been going up. It's been going, they've been getting closed, but major issues have been going up pretty significantly. And so the question is, how long do you think we can maintain that? Because personally, I think Drupal 8 can be a game changer. Personally, the whole decoupled Drupal, the ability for Drupal to be a service and to be a provider and an endpoint, and as well as like a repository for content, and just sending out all its information via REST to all the different resources and processes and applications. I think it's a really good position, but if it takes another 2 years to get out, then something else will just fill that void. And the question is, how long until it starts to become a problem, until people start leaving Drupal because it's been so long?
I don't know. I don't know that anybody is leaving Drupal. I mean, if you're doing a project now, chances are, and Dries said it even again in his keynote, chances are you're using Drupal 7. You're not leaning on Drupal 8 quite yet. But there are companies out there that are building production sites with Drupal 8, so it is seeing some production use. And I think it's one of those things where Drupal 7's very well developed, where very robust, and you can do a lot of things with it, even the REST stuff if you need to. So it's not like it's not a race to see who can get out, who can get a release out first. Drupal has a version that's perfectly capable of doing everything it needs to do, and I think that personally, I feel that waiting or making sure that Drupal 8 is ready before releasing it is definitely very important. And if it takes another 6 months or a year, I don't want it to, but if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I think I was in the first time sprinters workshop on Friday at DrupalCon, which was an awesome experience for me. And that room was packed. That room was packed with people, so much so that they had to open like an overflow room up. And there were people that were definitely interested in getting into Drupal 8 and finding issues that they could submit patches for and getting things done. So I think that there's a big swell of support and work going into it. And I don't know. I don't think it's going to be 2 years, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was another 6 months to a year before it's ready.
I'd also want to just remind everyone how ambitious of a release this is. I mean, this is not a 5 to 6 or 6 to 7 release.
Absolutely.
This is a huge release for Drupal. We basically jacked up the house, ripped out the foundation, poured a new foundation. And not only were we putting the house down, but we're putting the house back down and renovating a good portion of it. There's a lot of modules that are going from contrib into core that for the most part were rewritten to take advantage of all the Symfony goodness.
That's definitely true. You'll see if you go and watch those Drupal 8 talks at DrupalCon, some of the intro talks, you'll see that things are so different and so new, and it's definitely better because we're including Symfony and we're getting more right with the object-oriented coding community. But it's definitely, you can see how much work it is to kind of merge or migrate this system, no pun intended, to what it's going to be in Drupal 8. So I definitely think people need to keep that in mind.
Well, and one thing I heard and actually experienced firsthand a couple of times was that, with Drupal 8, with so many things being new, it resets the learning curve. That, you know, every tutorial you read now does not assume you know hardly anything. So, and I mean, I'm in the middle of writing one that's going to go up on, you know, the blinkreaction.com/ffweast website that, you know, is going to do exactly that, like walk you through some concepts that, you know, for people that have been doing object-oriented programming for the last 15 years, they're like, okay, tell me another one. But for, you know, Drupal programmers, which is what I've been made, you know, primarily, it is new. It is just this word just doesn't like feel right in your mouth yet, you know, just even saying it out loud. So, and there was actually a moment in the Coders Lounge. There was, you know, a young kid. He had been to Larry Garfield's session earlier in the day where he wrote a module called the Hugs module, and he wanted to rewrite the Hugs module to do this other function. And I was like, you know, we really could probably just start with the Drupal 8 console and generate you a module that, and you'd be able to work at it faster. But that process of like tearing apart a working module was something I've never done for Drupal 8 before. So I kind of like stuck with it and stayed working on this, you know, project with this kid for a little while. And you know, I just said to everybody at the end, I was like, he better go on to be another Larry or another, you know, Aaron Winborn or another Amitai someday. I hope that, you know, people invest in the next generation too.
I was in Larry's talk, and you know, it was really an eye opener for module development in Drupal 8, and it was very you know, Larry's a great speaker, and he's very good at articulating his points and using code to kind of be able to follow along. And I actually really enjoyed that talk because I was kind of like, same as you, Ryan. I was kind of like, object-oriented coding, like Symfony, like all this new stuff. You know, what's it all about? And just being in that talk, I was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense as to how the whole system kind of plays together. And definitely recommend checking that out if you have time, because it was well worth it.
So, how do you guys feel about the Drupal 8 Accelerate project? Do you think that that's, you know, helping move the project along? Do you think that's going to get Drupal 8 out quicker? Is it something that you even know about or looked into? I know that they spoke about it quite a bit at DrupalCon. I'm just curious.
It was neat. Like the password to the Wi-Fi was Drupal 8 Accelerate. Like it was like subversive marketing on the part of the DA for sure. But yeah, actually, Mike. Well, I guess it's on behalf of the Drupal Easy podcast. We actually did our own like micro campaign for Drupal 8 Accelerate, and I actually handed a bunch of people like a NPR style consolation prize. I made a bunch of tiles with the Drupal icon on them. So if you gave $50 under Mike's campaign, I would actually send you one out of my own pocket. And
I wish I had something to put my drink on.
Right now.
I have not gotten my coaster yet, so
yes.
tease Ryan about that.
They're in the kiln.
So right now they're actually up to just over $200,000 for the Drupal 8 Accelerate campaign. And does anybody know what the goal is?
Yeah, 200. Yeah, 250 is the goal. Okay. I'm a little. I think it's a double-edged sword. I mean, it's great. We're raising money, and it's going to go towards, you know, paying people to work on critical issues, and that's great. But I feel, you know, there's part of me that says, well, that's kind of a bummer because it's really, you know, realistically, that money's only going to go to fund people who have proven that they could solve critical issues and that they have a plan. So it feels like it's going the opposite way of democratizing Drupal, right? It feels like, okay, well, the people who are already, you know, beyond the velvet rope, so to speak, are the ones who are really going to be eligible for that money. And the thousands of people who may have one or two patches into Drupal core really aren't, because they haven't demonstrated that they can, you know, solve critical issues.
Well, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, it certainly is something that you have to be very careful I'm not sure that it's only for the people, as you say, beyond the velvet rope. I mean, there's certainly several grants that were awarded to Drupal camps to fund sprints. So it's not
Right, exactly.
necessarily,
Yeah.
so you can get some newer people in that way.
That's true.
But on some level, the more complex. Well, first of all, Drupal 8 isn't out, so it's not like Drupal 7 is out. So there's tons and tons and tons of experts. By the mere fact that Drupal 8 isn't out, there's fewer experts, and by the fact that it's more complex, and as you said, jacking up the house, ripping up the foundation, starting from scratch almost, on some level, it's far more complex. So, on some level, it's about providing the people that are able to some financial freedom and incentive to spend more time, because some people like Daniel Weiner or Wolfgang, they spend, or Peter Wolan, well, I don't know how to say his last name, Wolanin, um, you know they already donate tons of their time. They already spend some of their company time, and then just being able to provide some kind of grant to allow them, some additional incentive is certainly valuable, and it's certainly a much larger project now. It's starting to get to the point where it can't be maintained like Red Hat. Red Hat is community maintained as well, but it also needs to have some sort of financial backing behind it. Otherwise, it just its user base is much too large and its code base is much too large just for volunteers. And
Right.
AAA, I can't compare it with Red Hat necessarily, but it's approaching that.
No, I don't want anybody to think I am anti-deaccelerate. There's a reason why I started a micro campaign and I've given money to it. I'm all for it because it will. I have no doubt it will help us accelerate the release of D8. There's no doubt about it. I just worry that in the long term, we're seeing, and again, this is something that I'm not against. I advocate for it as well. But there are more and more companies who are paying their developers to work on core. Some full-time, some not so full-time. And I just think we have to be very careful as a community about that to make sure that people who aren't being paid to work on core still feel they have an equal voice in the matter.
That's a very good point.
That's where my concern is. I am all about. I just want to make sure the roots that Drupal was founded on stay firmly entrenched.
So moving away from DrupalCon a little bit, and I'm gonna break the rules here. I want to know, and I'm not going to call them parties. I'm going to call them networking events because Mike and I both said that DrupalCon is very much a networking event as well as an educational event. I want you guys to tell me the one, again, networking event that you went to that you thought was beneficial, whether it was because you met somebody interesting or it was had a good theme or whatever. Go ahead, Mike. You're up first.
Oh gosh, I was afraid you were going to pick me first because I'm still trying to think of which one I want to mention. Ryan, do you have one ready to go?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and not choose a party. I'm going to call it the lunch party. That's probably one of my favorite times at DrupalCon because everyone's coming out of different rooms. I think they actually had like 2 different places to eat lunch. So there was almost no way that you were going to see someone that during lunch with, I think it was like 3,500 people there or something along those lines, that you just sit down at a table and you say, "Hi, my name is Ryan. I come from Florida. Oh, have you heard of this weird podcast thing that I do?" And then as soon as they found out that I worked for FFW, they were like, "What does it mean?" And then I pulled out my phone and I was like, "Well, I made this funny web page, but it means friends from work, so that's all I got for you." But I really enjoy the lunch. There's like total bumping up against random strangers, and it's an hour that is like solely devoted to nothing but people sitting at a table.
Absolutely, I think lunch is a great networking event to bring up, and I agree. It's a good time. You always meet new people, and they served us some pretty yummy food, so that was a plus. Mike, do you still need time?
No, I got one. And
okay.
Mine's not a party either because I I don't like to stay up super late because I definitely like getting up early in the morning
I
and getting.
will say that I saw Mike up kind of late, but he excused himself and went home and got a good night's sleep. Very responsible of him.
Yeah, I just don't. I know that when I have to, I had to present on Thursday, so I think, John, I ran into Tuesday night.
Wednesday.
Wednesday night. Yeah,
Tuesday night. No,
okay.
Tuesday night.
I'll go to the parties. I'll have a beer or two, but that's about it for me. And I'm usually on my way back by 10:30 at the latest, just because I'd like to get up early, and that's kind of what I do, and go for a run or something. So my favorite networking was the exhibition hall, I think. It's where and I make it a point to make a lap or two of the exhibition hall every day, and I'm not necessarily looking for, exhibitors to talk to, but invariably I see people I know that I haven't seen in a year, and just, hang out and have a nice 15, 20-minute talk and just catch up, and I really enjoy that. I'm not a big fan of networking at most of the DrupalCon parties because usually, I'm going to sound like a 95-year-old person here. They're usually like really loud, and I hate, it's a pet peeve of mine having to scream at someone to have a conversation. So I actually prefer places that are more subdued. Not that the exhibition hall was quiet, but you don't have to scream at someone. I will say, so I have a real quick embarrassing story. And that, John, you're part of, and I think you know that you're part of it.
Oh, man.
We were walking, or I was walking, I guess, was it also Tuesday night? Did I see when we were on our way to that Media Current party?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
True.
And, John, I don't know if anyone's ever told you this before, but you look like Ben from Valachi.
I've never heard that before.
Or I think you do.
Okay.
And
well, that's good.
That probably explains a lot, because I know when I walked up to you, I said, I'm pretty sure I said, "Hey, Ben." And then I'm pretty sure I also said something about the fact that I can't believe you were up on stage again at the pre-note again, or something like that. And it probably took me a good 20 minutes, a half hour. I think we were actually at the DrupalCon party, at the Media Current party, before I realized, oh no, that's not Ben. That's the guy from Talking Drupal. And I think it's one of those things that a lot of people, and I know it is, because a lot of people at DrupalCon see people they recognize and they've talked to in the past, can't remember their names. I know it happens to me all the time. So let me just publicly apologize, John. First of all, sorry that I called you Ben.
That's totally okay. I don't even think I realized you called me Ben.
Okay. But I'm sure that I do that at least three or four times at DrupalCons to different people.
I always, on that same note, I always feel bad when I'm like, I know that guy's name.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have to look at his name tag because I'm not sure that I am right. And usually I look down and I go, yeah, I'm right. But it's just that, oh man, I just feel like such a jerk because I'm like, it's obvious I'm looking at your name tag. And I really do know who you are, but
it really is. It's kind of like the dirty hidden secret of DrupalCon. Is that what we should play like Indian, right? We should have name tags like on our foreheads.
Yeah, totally. Or everybody should get Google Glass so they can do that creepy face recognition lookup thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's not nerdier than having, the Indian style playing card on your forehead. One or the other is probably the same level of nerdiness.
That's probably true. So, you know what? You guys have swayed my my original question, and I'm actually not gonna pick a party either. Even though I did go to some great partner parties, thanks to all of Oomp's partners for inviting me. It was awesome. I'm actually gonna talk about the sprints. I said I went to the first time sprinters workshop, and after that they kind of let you out at lunch, and after the first time sprinters, you can go into the mentored sprints and kind of take an issue and start hammering away at it. And it was really cool to go through the first time sprinters thing, get my computer all set up, get D8 up and running, and then be able to sit at a table with people and just work on an issue and ask questions and get that kind of kind of support and community building for like a whole afternoon. I was able to actually submit a small patch to Drupal 8, which is cool. It's still working through the workflow, but it was just a really cool experience to be able to sit with a bunch of people and work on something that we all use, throughout the year, and really try to make the software, the platform better. So I'm definitely going with the sprints as one of my favorite networking events. All right, let's. Anybody have any last thoughts about DrupalCon before we move on? I will take the silence as a no. So I'm actually going to toss this back over to Nick. I think what we're going to do is let the Talking Drupal, sorry, that would be us, the Drupal Easy guys, talk about what they do best and some tips and tricks for different segments of the community. So, Nick, I'm going to pass it off to you and let you take over.
Yeah. So as we mentioned in the intro, you guys are with Drupal Easy, and for our listeners that don't know, Drupal Easy focuses quite a bit on training, specifically Drupal training and career, providing career opportunities afterwards. It's been going on for a few years now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your guys' perspective when it comes to a couple of different points. One thing is when you're focusing on training and when you're training people, you're not necessarily doing, and if you're doing, you're not training. So how do you find that balance of needing to stay current on what's current in Drupal, stay current on what's coming up in Drupal, like Drupal 8, because if you're going to be training, you need to be up to speed before the general population. And how do you make sure that you're balancing the needs of the people you're training as well as your own needs of keeping up to speed?
You put a lot of hours in. That's what you do. I would feel like I love training. I'm in the middle of one of our 12-week classes right now, and we normally have what we call a spring break week about halfway through the training, just to give students a breather, a chance to catch up if they fell behind, as well as a chance to kind of get ready for what comes after spring break, which is basically our development weeks, where we learn module development and theme development, and we're coding and stuff like that. So we shifted our spring break a little bit this year to coincide with DrupalCon, and we had our first class. We picked back up last night, and I was amazed at how excited I was to get back to teaching. And I'd only it'd been a week and a half, but I was really kind of pumped for it all day, and it was module development, so it's a subject I really enjoy teaching. So I think it's one of those things where having a passion for it really helps. But the other side of it is that I know, I'm super comfortable knowing that I know what I'm talking about when I'm teaching, because I do it. I do it every day. I don't think I could teach Drupal or be a Drupal trainer if I wasn't, building Drupal sites every day. Just this morning, I was working on a client site. I was using the CTools modal, and creating a bit of functionality on a client site that involved modal windows and some jQuery and all that good stuff. So the balance is, for me, it's all about making sure I can teach and do it in good faith, knowing that what I'm teaching students is real. It's the way things are actually done in the community. It's best practices. And it's not just me, taking a Drupal book or a curriculum that I wrote 3 or 4 years ago and rehashing it. My curriculum is, it's never done. It's constantly being improved based as how my skills change and improve as well. And over the years, so this is the 6th go round of this program. I've taught it once for Acquia as well, so I've taught it 7 times now, or I'm in the process of teaching it our 7th time. So I know that it works because we've got some amazing graduates, but I also I can also look at it today and compare it with what we taught 4 years ago for the first course, and it's radically different. Because as things have changed, the curriculum has changed, and it's only gotten better. So that balance point that you're talking about is, I don't know how people who don't build sites or don't write their own curriculum, do it. I don't know. I don't think I could be one of those people. Not that I don't want to seem like I'm putting them down. It's just for me, I'm a bit of a control freak. So having that control over the curriculum and having that control over what I'm teaching and how I'm teaching it is super important to, kind of get that feeling like, yeah, I'm doing right by these students.
Very cool. So maybe I'll direct this next portion at Ryan. I know that you were the original founder of Drupal Easy, so you're certainly no stranger to the training game. Other than the obvious answer of taking a Drupal Easy course or taking some of that training, what would you say is maybe the #1 tip for somebody who's looking to get into Drupal? They don't really have too much experience in the web, or maybe they have a little bit of experience with WordPress or something, but they just want to get into the world of Drupal. Where do you generally tell people to start?
I mean, for me, like, having a real project to work on is maybe the #1 thing that you can do to teach yourself Drupal. Is like, and I don't even know that a personal project counts as much as a project for someone else, because as soon as they tell you something, it's already being translated from what's in their head into words, and then you have to translate that from the words into the architecture of the site and the mouse clicks and all the button pushes and all of the content types, all that stuff. That is basically if you can get that from Drupal, then all the other stuff is just figuring out, do I need a module here? Do I need a view here? Do I need, like, which building block do I need today? Versus as soon as you can learn all of that, like, well, I could do it this way, or I could do it that way, or I could do it that way, that's what it means to be a Drupaler, right? And you could say, like, oh, well, I don't know how to write, Sass for CSS. That's not necessarily a Drupal skill. You know what I mean? Oh, I don't know how to push things into Git. That's not necessarily a Drupal skill, right? All those other things, there are lots of ways to learn those things, but the Drupal thing is working on a project.
Okay.
And I would say, I mean, the reverse is maybe, I mean, the reverse, but like if you are already a programmer and you're looking to get into Drupal, then it's more like, I know how to do this one way. So an example is, in my personal life, I learned Python in the last year. I've written a couple of Python scripts before, but I wouldn't say that I knew Python. And I had a real project to do. Somebody gave me a Python script, and I had to modify it, and I had to add a bunch of stuff to it, and it was for my job. And like, I got to learn this. I have to do this for real now. So just going through that experience, instead of me just going, well, I would have done it this way in PHP, or I would have done it this way in Perl, or I would have done it this way in a Bash script. Like, I had a Python book open, and I was going, like, how does Python do this technique, whatever it happens to be? And I didn't just, like, take the shortcut. You know what I mean? So I think that's a tip, is, like, there are shortcuts out there, there are alternative methods, but if you're trying to teach yourself Drupal from something else, don't take shortcuts. You will thank yourself so much at the end of the project. Probably about 80% of the way through the project, you'll get there and you'll go, oh man, I'm so glad that I did it this way, because there's a reason why everybody in Drupal uses views instead of writing their own SQL queries, right? As an example.
Yeah, Ryan, I think what you're talking about when you're saying a real project, just a project that has some level of accountability somewhere.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, that you kind of covered two of the questions there. The first one is beginners. Like you said, if you're a beginner, don't necessarily worry about necessarily the best way, because as you said, in Drupal, there's always 3 or 4 different ways to do or solve a particular problem. The thing is, you just need to never forget that it's always good to go back and revisit things. Like for me, I know that there's as you build sites and get more and more sites, you discover new modules, or a new module is created and it becomes part of your workflow, like module filter or admin menu or something. And you'll find you go back to a website that you haven't touched in 2 years because the client needs other than updates or something, because the client needs something new, and you're like, oh yeah, that's easy. You go in to do it, and you realize, this site was finished 2 years ago when module filter wasn't even out. So you go to enable something, like you see the default module page, you're like, what is going on? And it's your knowledge base is always growing. So I'll pose this question to both of you, because this is kind of an interesting question for me personally, because it's where kind of where I'm at. I'm a little bit beyond this curve. As you said, there's a learning curve. Drupal 8 kind of resets that. Drupal 7 though has a notorious learning curve, and it's got a couple of cliffs along the way. And we had a Drupal meetup in Providence, Rhode Island last week. And this kind of came up as a topic there as well. So it's definitely something that people sometimes struggle with. And that is, okay, you've now been working with Drupal for 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years, sometimes 3 years. You feel pretty proficient. You can install pretty much any module. You can write views with contextual filters that have 16 relationships and don't crash the site when they get called. And you feel like you really know what you're doing. But then you get to a client that asks for something that can only be done in a custom module. So you think, oh yeah, I'm used to Drupal, I can do that, and you start looking around and you start hearing about hooks and bootstrapping and all sorts of other things. How do you guys teach, or how do you recommend somebody who's familiar with Drupal, not necessarily a very strong programmer, but starting to find the need to write custom modules? How do you get people over that hump?
Okay, so I mean, one really good one that comes up all the time is like the examples module, right? Yep. There's a reason why that module exists. There's like 10 or 20 very common things you're going to do with a module, and here is a thing that you can rip apart and start playing with. I don't think that's the only thing, but I would say like one tip for sure is that coding as a discipline, there are not a lot of sacred cows in coding. Like, you write a script, you could come back the very next day with new information and write the same script a different way. There's usually not one way to do something. And so if you have the attitude that every piece of code you write is more of a sketch than a masterpiece, you can get a lot of your own like personal anxiety out of the way when you're just trying to figure something out. I dabble a lot in improv performance, improv comedy kind of stuff, and right, every single time we get on stage for that, we cannot bring anything. We cannot bring any like idea with us. We can bring our life experience and our personality and whatever, but the actual like, I'm going to stand in this spot and I'm going to move my hand this way and I'm going to deliver this line is never the same from one day to the next. And I use that analogy a lot when I'm talking about learning to write code, that especially I would say people taking Mike's class probably experience this all the time, right? He teaches them one way to do something, and then a week later he says, okay, that way I taught you how to do this? You're never going to do that again, but you have to learn how to do this so you know why this new method is the time-saving best practice way, because we all used to do it this way until someone invented the features module, or someone invented the context module, right? My earliest days of writing PHP in Drupal was I would write PHP in views arguments, I would write PHP in the views fields, and I would write PHP in block visibility area. You can't write PHP in most of those places now, But that was how I got started writing PHP for Drupal. Like, I was a PHP programmer, but then when I got to Drupal, like, I didn't hardly write any code for the first 2 years or so.
Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that is I would find if you're new, if you're comfortable site building, and as Nick said, you're getting into the time when now, maybe you have to write a custom module for this. I would find somebody, call them a mentor, call them a buddy, call them a coworker, call them someone on IRC. Find someone who is willing to kind of not look over your shoulder while you work, but just to provide occasional guidance to you while you go through this process. Because there's a lot of things in Drupal programming that you could bang your head for 3 hours trying to figure out, but someone who knows what they're doing can just point you in the right direction and say, you know what, you should probably go look at the user access function over there, because that's probably going to save you about 6 hours of time. So it's not someone to help you write the code. It's not someone to tell you how to do it. It's someone for you to bounce ideas off of and give you constructive feedback. That type of person, that's kind of what the Drupal community is all about. Having that type of mentor is, I think, invaluable. And that's one of the things that I teach, whether it's with our long-form program or with one-day trainings, is you want to grow your network a little bit so that you never feel like you're in by yourself. So that's a terrible feeling when you're staring at a piece of code for 3 hours saying, why doesn't this work? When 90% of the time, if you screen share with someone for 5 minutes, they can look at your code and say, you missed a semicolon. So having that kind of support system is, I think, invaluable.
I can't second that enough. I've said this on the show before. I was doing Drupal. I'm in Worcester, which, if you don't know Massachusetts, you probably don't know, but it's the second biggest city in New England. It's about 60 miles from Boston, 50 miles from Boston or so, and there's no Drupal community in Worcester. And for the longest time, I thought Boston was too far to go, or Providence was too far to go for that kind of stuff. And the only experience I had with the community was Drupal.org and IRC. And it was great. It helped me build my business. But finally, I broke down, decided, I was bored one night, decided to go to the Drupal meetup in Boston. And, that directly led to me co-presenting with Kay at, the Western Mass Drupal Camp, where I ended up meeting, I met John and Steven and Jason there, but I only remember meeting Jason. And then eventually, get connected with the podcast. So, it's definitely, people that are looking to get into Drupal at any stage of the game, find a mentor, and then, by the same token, mentor other people.
I would say Jason is very memorable.
He was the keynote speaker, so that's probably why. So now we're on to the next section of our show, Module of the Week. We have Module of the Week, obviously, every week, and this week's module is Select or Other, and I think you brought that up, Mike. So
yeah, it's actually a nice segue into what we were just talking about, because Select or Other is one of those modules that, before I found it, I probably, wrote it as a custom module at least 2 different ways than I could think of. And then one day I stumbled upon it on Drupal.org and kind of went, oh, I should just use that. It's a really simple module. It provides a field widget for list text fields that if the option, you can type in the normal 5 options and have them appear as a select list or radio buttons or checkbox. But it also gives you an other checkbox. And if you select other, it just pops up a little text area or a text field for you to type your other answer into. That's all it does. So it allows you, it's kind of akin a little bit to tagging, right? Where select from one of these or add a new one. But there's no code involved. You just enable it and you set it as your widget and you're done. It's just one of those handy little modules that if you don't know about and you need that functionality, that you might think it's a real headache, especially if you've never written a custom module before. But having that module kind of on your tool belt is just one of those handy things. When you see something like that, you say, okay, well, that bit of functionality is not a problem because we're going to use select or other and be done with it and move on to the next thing.
That's so useful because before I knew about that, which was maybe an hour ago, I would actually use web form conditionals to not just for that, but use that as one of the web form conditionals. Was, hey, if they check other, show up this text box, and now I know I don't have to do that anymore.
I think we could have a whole podcast on all the various ways to accomplish this task.
I think we're gonna have to schedule that. We'll have you guys have you guys back, and we can talk about the 800 different ways you could do one task in Drupal.
Yeah, this select or other though. This seems like the simplest for this particular use case though.
Absolutely. So with that said, that brings us to the end of our show. I'd like to thank our guests, Mike and Ryan. And as per the norm, we're going to sign off with telling everybody where they can find you. So before I get to that part, let's talk about just some things that are going on. First thing is, Ryan brought this up in the chat. We did not talk about DrupalCon. DrupalCon next year is going to be in New Orleans, so I look forward to seeing you guys in New Orleans, if not before. Also, I would like to note that NEDCamp sessions, the New England Drupal Camp sessions, are open. So if you're in the New England area or you want to come to New England on Columbus Day weekend, submit a session to the New England Drupal Camp, and you can come talk to the New England Drupal community about Drupal. So sessions are open. You can find those at nedcamp, nedcamp.org. And with that, Mike, where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
My username is ultimike, pretty much everywhere, Twitter and Drupal.org. And of course, you can, if you haven't got enough of Ryan and I, you can listen to the Drupal Easy podcast. Released a similar schedule to Talking Drupal every other week. Coming up, we're actually recording tomorrow with Ben Jeevens, who's a Coltrane on Drupal.org. We're going to talk about two-factor authentication on Drupal.org. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have Jesus and Ryan. Maybe you can help me with his last name. Is it Olivier?
Yeah, in my brain it's Olivas.
Olivas, okay. Who one of the creators of Drupal Console and one of Ryan's co-workers.
Very cool. Ryan, where can we find you?
Yeah, I go by Liberator, and you spell that without the last vowel, just like Flickr. You can pretty much find links to everything that I'm doing on ryanpricemedia.com. I don't really blog on my blog that much anymore, but like this week, for example, I've been posting a lot of videos during the Orlando Fringe Festival, which is a great theater festival. If you have a Fringe Festival near you this summer, go check it out. You will see something that you never thought humans were capable of doing. How's that? I'm a big fan of theater and performing arts, so go check those out. And yeah, other podcasts. I guess you guys mentioned those at the beginning of the show, so I'll leave it at that.
Cool. Nick?
You can find me online at Nixvan, Nicxvan, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Awesome. And as always, I'm John Picozzi, at John Picozzi on all the major social networks, and Drupal.org for that matter. You can also find me at oomfink.com. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you.